Brian Kohberger, the man accused of killing the 4 Idaho college students, faces 4 charges of first-degree murder. These charges carry sentences that include life in prison and potentially the death penalty. Since his arrest, new evidence used by investigators to find the suspect has been revealed. One of the 2 roommates who were not attacked saw a man in the home on the night of the crime and was able to describe a figure who was 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, with bushy eyebrows.
It was also revealed that DNA left at the crime scene on a knife sheath was linked to DNA from trash at Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania. Joining us now to discuss is senior national correspondent at NewsNation, Brian Entin. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So are we any closer to having any sense of potential motive in this horrific quadruple murder?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we've gotten so much new information in the 18-page probable cause affidavit, but it makes no mention of motive. I've been in touch with the families. I was talking to them last night. They still don't know of a motive. So there's no indication that police have anything on motive right now. I mean, it's certainly possible that they know something behind the scenes. There is a court hearing on Thursday here in Idaho where we may find out a little more. But if there's a preliminary hearing a couple of weeks from now, that's likely when we might really find out what they know.
Can you help us understand how it could be that one of the surviving roommates sees Kohberger, presumably a hooded figure, hears some crying or screaming, and this is while he's or after or at the time of the murders, like very early in the morning, 4 a.m. or something, but then the police aren't called, the bodies aren't found till the later, till the actual morning, like 11 or noon. So is there? I think a lot of people have questions about with the surviving roommates. So then they waited hours and hours to alert, or what were they? I mean, there's a lot of speculation about why that could be. Maybe they were just very tired. Maybe they had been intoxicated themselves. I mean, there could be benign reasons for waiting later. But I think a lot of people, myself included, are very confused about exactly how that ends up happening.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that was probably the big jaw-dropping tidbit from the affidavit because we were all under the assumption that the surviving roommates were asleep. But one of them, at least Dylan, was awake. And we also thought they were sleeping on the bottom floor where there were no killings. But Dylan was actually up on the second floor where the murders happened. So there is this question. She says she was awake, that she heard screams, that she heard a man's voice, that she heard the dog barking. And then that just after 4 a.m., she saw the killer walk by her bedroom, that she saw him wearing a black mask covering his mouth and nose, and that she was able to describe his height, his build, the fact that he had bushy eyebrows, and that he walked out towards the back sliding glass door. And then here's what you talk about. I mean, that was just after 4 a.m. It wasn't until 11:58 a.m., so hours and hours later, that the 911 call was made and that police finally came out. She says in the affidavit, she's quoted saying that she was frozen in fear, essentially. And certainly that's a possibility. She went back into the bedroom and locked the door. The families of the victims right now, I interviewed Kaylee's sister last night on NewsNation, and she basically said that everyone should stop the judgment, that, Dylan's a young girl, that no one knows how they would react in that situation. But it's certainly very interesting that it took so long for her to call or for whoever to call 911. And certainly she'll be a witness at some point, whether it be at the preliminary hearing or if there is a trial. And I'm sure we'll find out more exactly, what she was going through in that moment.
Brian, tell us what you can about the families and how they're dealing with this. Do they feel, is there any sense of relief that somebody has been arrested? Where are they at in terms of their emotional journey dealing with this horror?
So, yeah, I think there was definitely relief when the arrest was announced, especially with the Gonzalez family. They told me they almost felt this feeling of joy because they had just been living, just in agony and felt like they couldn't even grieve Kaylee's death until there was an arrest. So there was relief. But I think they're almost like overwhelmed now when you think about the court process just beginning. I mean, they were in court last week. It's a small town. It's a small courtroom. They sit very, very close to where the man accused of killing their daughter is. You can imagine how overwhelming that would feel. And then just knowing that, they've said they want to be at every hearing, and this is going to be a very, very long process. I mean, all our indications are that he may plead not guilty, that he's saying that he's innocent. Brian Kohberger is, at least according to his public defender, when he was in Pennsylvania. So I just think they feel overwhelmed knowing that they have all of that lies ahead.
What have we learned that's new about Kohberger? I was looking at some of the reporting. I hear history of heroin use, but maybe that he'd gotten past that he bullied as a kid, kind of not social, but he seemed to have some friends. Some people have come forward and said they knew him, and he was not particularly shy, but not outgoing, but they knew him and he was fine. I hear a lot of discussion or debate about, like, was he a highly intelligent person? He was studying criminology. What more should we know or do we know about him?
Yeah, so, it doesn't appear that he had a ton of friends or any ex-girlfriends or anything like that we've been able to find. We've heard stories that he was bullied as a kid, that he was an overweight kid and bullied. He did have a drug problem, according to some friends at one point, but overcame that. Seemed like a socially awkward guy from most of the people that we've talked to. Obviously an extensive knowledge of criminal justice, got his master's in it and then was in the process of getting his PhD in criminology at Washington State University. He was sort of built up initially as like this, person who was able to get away with this and then, almost like genius. But really, when you look at, the affidavit, I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, which ultimately led to him getting captured, mainly that he left, he had a knife and he left the knife sheath, which is essentially the cover for the knife. He left that at the scene. And that is what contained the DNA. The button on the knife sheath had DNA on it, which they were able to connect back to Kohberger. So that was a big mistake. One of the creepiest things of the whole thing that I find is that, according to the police, his cell phone was tracked going back to the house after the murders at about 9:15 a.m., hours after the murders. And there's all sorts of questions about, was he going back to sort of see if the police were there to sort of get the thrill of it all and sort of like circus-like atmosphere? There's other killers in the past that have gotten to almost a high off of that. Or could he have been going back, realizing that he left the knife sheath there and going back to maybe want to go back in the house and retrieve it? We don't know the answers to those questions right now.
We don't know whether the victims knew him at all or had any interactions with him previously. We just don't know that yet, correct?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't know. And as recently as last night, the families tell me they still haven't come up with any specific connections. Early on, there was sort of thought there were some Instagram profiles that followed some of the victims, but we've realized a lot of that stuff was created after his name came out. All these like people create fake social media profiles and stuff online, trying to look like they're him. So none of that has officially connected back.
Disgusting.
And did the affidavit say that the victims were awake when they were killed? My understanding had been that was unknown before. Is that something that was addressed in the affidavit?
Well, we know that at least some of the victims had defensive wounds, which would indicate that they were awake at some point trying to fight back. Ethan, one of the victims, he was found not in a bed, but actually on the ground, sort of in the hallway, which is another indication that he may have been awake and trying to fight back. So it's just so sad to think about what went on in that house, and then also what the surviving roommate heard. There was screaming, there was talking, there was crying. So it doesn't appear that they were just like totally killed while they were fully asleep or anything like that.
It's horrifying. Well,
horrific.
Brian, thank you for continuing to cover this. A lot of people interested, obviously, and want to see justice done. We'll have you back as soon as there's more to cover. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.